Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for our weekly journey we call Living Hope. The one show, the only show that talks to real people about what they're really going through with this deadly disease known as pancreatic cancer. With someone, well, a couple of people today here that can talk about this journey from personal experience here. Roberta Luna is one of them. Welcome back, Roberta.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me back. I'm glad you continue to let me in the door every week.
I don't know. Sometimes you're looking, a little. We were talking a little off air here. You're very dangerous looking figure here. So
apparently, and we'll share that maybe some other time.
They always call me. Is this lady okay? I said, yeah, let her in. Okay.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. I like coming in every week, so thank you. And today I'm very honored. June is National Cancer Survivor Month, and all June we've been highlighting and celebrating a survivor. And today we have with us Teona Ducre, which we joke around and we're twins.
Right.
So, right, I always say I'm the older twin, she's the prettier twin. But she joins us today. She's an 8-year survivor. She had her unique battle with pancreatic cancer. She's going to share that with us and help us raise awareness and empower the Black community.
And you guys say you're twins because you were diagnosed in the same
Yes, I guess
day.
I should have said that, right?
Little explanation.
That would
maybe
have
here.
come at some point. But yes, we were both diagnosed on April 1st. Different years, but we have a lot of other similarities as far as surgery and all that goes. But I'm gonna let Teona share her story. And hi, Teona, thank you. It's really great to see you. I've missed seeing you every year, so it's really nice to see you.
Hi, Twin. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited. And yes, we were diagnosed on the same day, incidentally, April Fool's Day. But I think by the fact that we're both here, we got the last laugh. Wouldn't you agree, Rebecca? Or excuse me, Roberta?
Definitely, I always say I'm the one with the last laugh. Who's laughing now, right? Can you share with us your initial symptoms that you had that kind of led you to go to the doctor and get your diagnosis?
Sure. Initially, it was literally just a stomach ache. It didn't seem like anything significant, but I had a stomach ache and I had some lower back pain, and I had just honestly been really tired. I went to like a urgent care minute clinic kind of thing. I was on my way out of town, hadn't really planned on going to the doctor, and I said, you know what, on the way to the airport, I swooped in and thought, it's probably something minor. Let me just see if I can get a prescription. And that was right around the end of March. And as we just talked about, by the time April 1st rolled around, I was getting a call. I'd been asked to go in and get a scan. And I got a call bright and early on April 1st that said, hey, we thought this was an ulcer, but I think we were wrong. It looks more like a mass on your pancreas. It took me a few minutes to kind of figure out what I was really being told. I was on my way out the door. I was getting ready to go have some fun for spring break.
Mhm.
And all of that came to a very abrupt halt. And later on in that day, I was told that this is most likely pancreatic cancer. And it started a whole rash of tests from there. And here I am 8 years later, thankfully, tumor-free, cancer-free, and all is well.
Oh, congratulations. I still have my tumor. I'm still living with it, but it's become dormant for whatever reason, and it can lay there and sleep as long as it wants until they find some way to safely remove it, right? And then I'll be cancer free as well. I can say that. So I'm very happy that you've had a great outcome. But can you kind of go into some of the testing that's done? Because I know a lot of people don't realize checking for pancreatic cancer is not as simple as just going down and getting a blood test. It's very invasive. Can you tell us what you had to go through to get that diagnosis?
Absolutely. On April 1st, it was really just, I'd had a scan earlier that morning that looked suspicious. And from there, it was about a 2-week process and various tests were run. And incidentally, the doctor that saw the scan initially, she sent it off to a surgical oncologist who said, this looks just like a water-based cyst, probably not cancer. Go home, celebrate spring break. I'll see you back in a couple of weeks. But thankfully, my mother said, no, we're not going to do it that way. Let's get a second opinion pretty quickly. And from that point, I did find a doctor that said, actually, this looks like cancer. And he said, so we're going to do a series of tests. It did start out with a blood test. My tumor markers were somewhere up around 33,000, I think, on a test that the normal range is like 60 max. So that blood test was the first indicator. After that, I had a PET scan because by that time they were pretty sure this probably is pancreatic cancer just based on that alone. But we decided to do a PET scan to see if there was any other indicators, another CT scan, an MRI, and then the last and final was EUS. We did endoscopic biopsy, and that was actually the final test. Um, and then by that point, it was time to go in and get a port and start chemo as quickly as possible. I think all told, it took about 30 days for everything to kind of come together before I started chemo. That was early April, and by the first week of May, I was starting chemotherapy.
Can you explain a little bit what an EUS is? I know a lot of people don't know, so could you explain that, please?
It is a very uncomfortable and, as you mentioned, invasive procedure. It is basically a needle biopsy that is used through they go in through your throat. You're completely put under, and then the procedure is really just using an actual scope to go in and detect if there might be cancer. And then in the course of that, there's a teeny tiny little needle, I think, that will actually take a tissue sample. And it is, once you wake up from the procedure, it's not a long procedure if all goes well. The first time I did it, they weren't able to get the sample, so they actually had to do it twice. But the procedure, part of what makes it so uncomfortable is going in through the throat. So even though you're completely asleep, waking up, I just remember having the scratchy throat, a lot of indigestion. It's a very uncomfortable procedure, but it is the best way to actually detect pancreatic cancer, is what most doctors settle on now, I think.
Yeah, it is, like I said, very invasive and uncomfortable waking when you wake up. But again, it is the only way to really get that set diagnosis, and that's why we really need a little, more testing, like something with a blood test or something a little bit easier that we could do. You mentioned that you went in because of your mom's advice. We don't always listen to mom, but it was a good thing you listened to mom this time,
That date
right?
was a good thing.
Yeah, to seek a second opinion. I know I talked to a lot of people, and they're fearful to seek that second opinion. Did you have any fear going to another doctor? And then did you have to go through any special procedure to get that second opinion?
That's a great question. I don't remember being fearful. I think I was just in shock. I couldn't believe it was all happening. I mean, I literally was thinking I have an ulcer or maybe just a stomach virus that was causing some discomfort. Never in my wildest dreams did I think it was a cancer diagnosis, in particular pancreatic cancer. I didn't know anybody that had had that particular type of cancer. Cancer does not run in my family. So getting the second opinion was difficult, more so finding a doctor. As I mentioned, it was spring break. Crazily enough, a lot of doctors were out on spring break too. A lot of doctors just had so many cases, they couldn't even take a new patient. So my bigger fear was trying to find somebody that would actually see me in a very short period of time. So once I did find somebody, I was pretty confident that this was the doctor for me. And I do tell people, we always say we're our own best advocates, right, Roberta?
Right.
Part of being our advocate is making sure we're comfortable with whoever we choose as a provider. And if we're not sure about the information, getting as much information as we can. So even once I saw that doctor and he said, this is definitely pancreatic cancer, I still went and got a third opinion, more about treatment options, and not whether or not the diagnosis was accurate. Probably 2 to 3 weeks after the initial scan, I started to have other symptoms, changes in stool. I was losing weight very, very, very rapidly. I think I lost something like 10 pounds, like in a matter of 2 weeks, which initially seemed great because I was trying to lose weight. But if you're rapidly losing weight, especially like that, that's not a good thing. So I think really that second opinion was somewhat comforting in a way, because at least I knew, okay, this is definitely cancer. And I felt pretty confident there was something that could be done about it.
I think if I remember right, you probably felt the same way or got the same advice I did, was like, go home, let's wait and see what happens, because you were too young and they didn't believe there was a family history of cancer in your family. Am I correct in remembering it that way?
So yes, initially when I went to the very first doctor that saw the first scan on April 1st, that was exactly what he said. He said, you're way too young. This isn't cancer. You have no family history. Go home, enjoy spring break, go to the beach, do something. His partner, who happened to do GI cancers, he was not, he was a surgical oncologist, but he didn't specifically do GI cancers. So he wasn't terribly experienced. So that's another thing I tell people, make sure whatever provider you select is somebody that is specifically experienced with GI cancers, pancreatic cancer. So he did send me along my way. And I think, again, just my mom saying, you're like, I didn't even look well. I didn't have jaundice, but I just didn't look well. And several people had commented by that time that I just didn't look like I was well.
Yeah, with mine it was, no, I had obviously had the family history, but I was told, I was too young, and at that point, doctors didn't really believe or know that there was any connection with, other family members, which thankfully now they have changed that. But with your, did your treatment between the second doctor and the third doctor suggestions, was that different, or what was?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the reason why I went and got that third opinion was because I was interested in clinical trials. I didn't know anything about cancer care, about treatment therapies, but I started researching and saw that clinical trials were a viable treatment option. And I just wanted to know if that was going to work for me. So I did a clinical trial finder, and there was a clinical trial that was happening in Noonan, Georgia, which is, maybe an hour away at Cancer Treatment Center. So I wasn't terribly educated about what clinical trials were, why I would use that over something else, but I knew it was something that I wanted to investigate because I wanted to exhaust every possibility. So when I went, the clinical trial was a little bit different. So typically, for people who may not know, clinical trials are standard of care plus some other newer therapy that they're just kind of trying to figure out if it'll be beneficial or not. So when I did ask the provider that I decided to go with, I said, is there going to be a big benefit? He said, listen, where they're at in the trial, you're still getting standard of care. He said, I don't feel like there's going to be a big difference in the treatment that you're getting. And he said, because of where they were at in the trial. So it didn't really change my opinion, but I'll tell you, it was more logistical than anything. I did like the other facility, but it was still a good hour, hour and a half away, depending on traffic. And I was a single mom, had a kiddo in high school. I still had a job, and the commute was the deciding factor. When I decided to be treated locally, I chose a clinic that was thankfully about 20, 25 minutes from my house. So I knew I could get there. If no one could take me, I could get there. I could Uber. I could even take our train here in Atlanta, the MARTA. So ultimately, my treatment choice came down to convenience and logistics, as opposed to what maybe was better or going to be more advanced care.
And it's tough that you have to make that decision, but what you don't, and good thing maybe you realize too, is you never know how you're going to feel after a treatment. So having to
Yeah.
commute all that way may not be a good thing. But
Yeah.
what was your treatment? What chemo did you take, or did you have the Whipple? I don't remember. So
I didn't have a Whipple.
okay.
I was one of those rare babies that had the opposite end. So I did a distal, as opposed to the Whipple, because my tumor was actually in the tail of my pancreas. So that did make me a little bit different. I think more commonly, pancreas cancer is found in the head. And in my case, it was in the tail. It was inoperable at the time. So that was why, after going to tumor board, doctors decided, like, hey, we don't think you'll survive surgery. The tumor was somewhere around 7 centimeters, and was just, it was going to be problematic for them to try to operate at the time. So the decision was made, let's try to shrink it first. FOLFIRINOX was not new at the time. This was in 2016, but doing trying to shrink the tumor and doing treatment, a couple of rounds of chemo before surgery was relatively new. So when I got called back in to see my surgical oncologist and my medical oncologist, they said, listen, we think it's going to be a better course of action to try to shrink your tumor as opposed to operate, or worse, just send you home and tell you to get your affairs in order. So I said, okay. So I did FOLFIRINOX, commonly known as 5FU. And I think we all know what the FU stands
Yes,
for.
we do. That's a perfect name.
Yes, it is truly the perfect name for it. And then there was I did the cocktail. So I think it was cisplatin, irinotecan, and there was a couple of other ones in there. I can't quite remember, but the 5FU was actually given to me through a catheter. I had a cute little bag that my daughter named Pete that I would take home at the end of the day. And that was something that was new too. In the years preceding this, typically when people got 5FU, they actually stayed in the hospital, was my understanding, for the 2 days. It's about 36 hours or so that the treatment runs, and then you can take the pump off. But I was fortunate enough to be able to go home at the end of an 8-hour infusion day and then just go home with my little bag and my, port all done up and a little pump on there and just sit at home, which was really kind of nice. I will say by day 3, my mother used to tease me that I was like a wilted flower, and I would go in and get the pump off, and they would hook me up to an IV and give me some fluids, and I would literally perk back up because before that I was dragging. And I don't know if is that the same treatment that you had, Roberta?
Yeah, I had that too. It was done a little differently. Mine was done in an IV form for hours in the hospital, but I didn't have to stay. But yes, we also named my pull because I could walk around. We called him Ivan. So it's funny how we name certain things. We give them names. So Ivan and I would take a tour around the hospital, talk to other patients and whatnot. But yeah, it's really quite a strong drug and can be very difficult for a lot of people. How did you maintain your strength and your health during doing all those?
I think one of the things I had on my side truly, I think, was my age. At 41, I was actually healthy, other than the running joke was, other than this stupid tumor, you're actually very healthy. So I think my age helped me. I had a wonderful chemo nurse. Her name was Joy. And on the very first day, she said, hey, if you can go walk after treatment, she said, it will actually make you feel better. It'll give you some energy. And she said, if you can just push through it. So I would literally go, probably by about the 4th treatment, I was able to drive myself because it was relatively close. And I started driving myself. I knew what side effects were going to be. I could typically get through all of the nausea and all of that stuff while I was still in that 8-hour session at the infusion center, and then drive myself back home. And I would go pick my son up from football, and they would typically still be practicing because it was summer 7-on-7s. And I would walk around the track with my little bag and just walk. And mind you, this was summer in Atlanta. So I don't know if that was the smartest thing to do in some regards because it was pretty hot, but it did help me kind of keep my energy and my strength, and it kept me motivated. But the other thing I had was incredible family and friends. I had a support community. The football team being one of them, my son, my daughter, my parents. I had a whole host of friends that lived very close by in my neighborhood, and even some friends that lived farther away that were either calling, texting, messaging, sending me Facebook messages, coming by the house, all of the things that communities do to support. I had during that year that I was going through treatment. And I think ultimately that was probably the thing that kept me going and even gave me energy when I just didn't have it.
Yeah, I think the support is really important, and I actually love your nurse's name, Joy. That that perfect for chemo too, right? Joy. So it's great. I'm glad you had that support, and I know a lot of people don't have that support. Do you have any suggestions for them? Like, where can they get it? How can they get it? How they can maintain? Because I think it's really important. Your attitude, I think, has a lot to do with your outcome.
Absolutely. I think you're right about that, Roberta, because so much of, I think what I did from the very beginning, and again, I was so blessed and so fortunate, and I know not everybody has this, but I had people that were cheering for me from the very beginning. And my auntie, who had cancer, she's a very good friend of my mother's, and I call her my auntie. And she said, listen, baby, you're a survivor from day one, and you've got to say it, and you've already beat this. And I started every day saying, I'm a survivor, I'm a survivor, I'm a survivor. I would literally in my bathroom, I have like this big huge vanity mirror, and in lipstick I would write little messages to myself on the mirror. And I would look at myself in the mirror through all of this lipstick and all of these positive messages. So I think our mindset has a lot to do with it. And when people don't have that, I think now there are so many places to go to get resources. I think Googling pancreatic cancer support groups, I know there's organizations, everything from Sina Magowitz, they have I think monthly, they do a monthly survivor call, like a webinar, that's all survivors. I think they do some other webinars throughout the year. Purple Pansies here in Atlanta has some wonderful support. I am a contact for a lot of people. When I've given my name and number and email address to organizations, that if somebody gets diagnosed, they can share my contact information. And I'm happy to talk to people or link them up with people, because as you know, everybody's journey is different. And I may not be the right person to talk to somebody for a lot of different reasons. They may have a totally different experience or age group or whatever the case is. But there are, as you know, this is a small community. In some kind of way, we all find each other and we talk to each other. And I think that really talking to other survivors is huge. When I first got diagnosed, the survival rate was 7%. I saw a TED Talk, and it was the father of a woman named Elizabeth, who happens to live in Atlanta. And I said, I got to find this woman. And then I went to an event that was sponsored by Purple Pansies, and this woman was there. I'd just seen a TED Talk, her dad talking about her having pancreatic cancer, and there she was, at an event, just randomly or not so randomly. And I think that helped me once I actually started seeing survivors, people that were living and thriving and going on with their life in a way that I didn't think was possible on April 1st when I got diagnosed. I think I had kind of initially felt very overwhelmed that I can't find anybody who survived. I hear these people exist, but I don't know anybody. So literally just seeing that one survivor helped me monumentally.
Yeah, it does. I remember meeting my first survivor, Peggy Kessler, and she was a longtime survivor, and it was just an odd relationship we had because she was very tall, I was very short. She seemed to feel that she could use me as her leaning post, apparently, but it was so good to meet somebody that I'm like, oh my God, she'd been surviving for a long time, and I had been told nobody survives, and then seeing with my own family history how true that was. It was just overwhelming the first time I met her, and just to know that she'd been surviving for over 5 years. So meeting the survivors, it really can make an impact, and it's really important. You do a lot of volunteer work, and I know one thing that I think we are all really concerned about is pancreatic cancer in the Black community. What have you seen? What are you doing? And how can we as a public help as well?
Yeah, so that became one of my passions very early on, was advocacy work. And I was fortunate that I was able to do some work with PanCan and go to Capitol Hill to advocate, and just even working in my local community, meeting with some of our local legislators and getting to share my story. But then as time went on, I started to realize the only thing that I had that was an indicator is that I'm Black, my race. That was literally the only indicator that I had that I would somehow develop pancreatic cancer. So I really started to talk more to doctors and people that were working in the community. What's happening? Why is our incident rate in the African American community considerably higher? I think I read somewhere down along the line that it was like 50 to 90% higher. African Americans are the most likely out of all racial groups to actually develop pancreatic cancer, and mortality rates are higher. So not only are we getting diagnosed more, we're dying more. We're getting diagnosed later. I was stage 3 inoperable. However, statistically, many patients who are Black that get diagnosed are getting diagnosed late stage, and also inoperable. So that indicates that there's huge health inequity there. And to my knowledge, the research indicates that it isn't some biological or genetic factor. So then I start thinking about what are the social factors? What are the economic factors? I had even said, like, me staying where I was at, a lot of that was logistics and economics. Financially, I couldn't afford to go to another community, Houston, or Jacksonville, or, Florida, to like a Moffat or a Mayo or Anderson. That was just not financially possible for me. And I think that the more I talk to individuals who are Black and are diagnosed, economics plays a part, logistics. I think some of our social and economic factors, but as well as some of our cultural factors. We don't go to the doctor. It drives me nuts. I am embarrassed to admit this. I had probably been sick for several years and had not gone to the doctor. I hadn't been feeling well for a long time. I did not go to the doctor until literally my teaching assistant looked at me and she said, "You look really bad." I was hurting so badly that I couldn't even stand up and deliver. I was teaching at the time. I couldn't even deliver a lesson. And I was still like, I'm fine. Some of that is just mindset. Some of that is I have so many other things to do. I know that in talking to patients over the years who are Black that have said, um, not only do I not want to go to the doctor, I am definitely not doing a clinical trial. And we know some of the perspectives behind a lack of trust in the Black community when it comes to how we perceive the medical community and our well-being. It's for a reason. There has been distrust, but I think some of that, when I talk to people, I try to encourage people. One, you got to go to the doctor. Two, you got to ask questions. And I think three, I'm hoping what will happen, the more advocacy and the more we become aware that we start seeing more diverse doctors in our communities that actually can connect with and relate to patients of color. And I think that in and of itself is very helpful.
How can someone like myself, obviously, and we joke that we're twins, but obviously, we're a little different. How can I help the Black community? Because, we don't have a lot of survivors that are Black that we can refer somebody to. So, I want to reach out to them. I want them to, I want to help them. What is the best way for me to reach out and be able to talk to them and help them any way I can?
Yeah. I get asked that question all the time when I do different things. And I think really, as in any situation, um, our communities, where we're at is where it starts. Who do you know in your community? Where are you at where other people of color might be? It can be anywhere. And I think really just sharing the story, where we're at is where it starts. Who do you know in your community? Where are you at where other people of color might be? It can be anywhere. And I think really just sharing the story. If you know somebody who happens to be Black, talking to them and saying, "Hey, you know what? I had pancreatic cancer too," right? And it, unfortunately, cancer does not discriminate. This is not discriminatory in nature. Unfortunately, I don't think it's who gets pancreatic cancer. I think it's who survives it. And that's part of when we're talking to people in the community, it's awareness, 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 sharing signs, sharing symptoms. I think those things really help. And then I think doing shows like this, Roberta, honestly, the more that we try to seek out, I met somebody just recently. I didn't meet the actual patient, but I met her sister, who literally tracked me down through LinkedIn. She saw something I did on a webinar, tracked me down through LinkedIn, called my job, got my phone number. Thankfully, they gave it to her. And she's a young woman. Um, Her sister was exactly, or is exactly my age that I was when I got diagnosed. Child the same age as my son at the time, and she's a young Black woman. And she said, "I just hadn't seen anybody else um, who's Black that happened to have pancreatic cancer. Can you please talk to my sister? What can we do?" And thankfully, I am so glad to report that as of the date of the walk, her sister had had surgery and is doing well. I've never actually talked to her sister, but I talk to this woman frequently, and she kind of keeps me posted. So I think really what we all need is to be able to come together and provide support for one another, but also putting the word out anywhere we can. To doctors, I think that's one place that we really have to start talking to the medical community more and saying these are things that we need. We need not just awareness, but we need cultural awareness. We need one of the biggest deterrents that I have found for people getting to treatment is location. If they don't have transportation, um, how do they get to the closest treatment center? And I think that's one of the things that we can start talking about more, are just basic fundamental needs that people have in Black communities.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, it's not a color. It's who's surviving and how can we help increase that rate, right? I really thank you for coming. It's it's wonderful to see you and have you. And I do have just a quick question, or maybe a couple. What is your future goals for advocacy and raising awareness for pancreatic cancer?
Mm. Um, I think that right now I am very heavily focused on health and equity right now. One of the goals I have is I really would like to look into becoming a health coach. I think I'm at a place in my journey now that I feel much more comfortable that, okay, I made it over that 5-year hump. I'm at 8 years now, and I really want my work to be more centered on how, not just how do we fix cancer once we get it, but how do we prevent it? Are there things within our diet? Are there things with our environment? And I really want the advocacy to be more around prevention and thriving, not just surviving once we get cancer. So I think that's where I'd really like to take this next step into my journey. And I'm turning 50 like in a couple of weeks. So this is a good time to really start shifting around that outside of just the survival mode.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really enjoyed seeing you and speaking with you, and I want to have you back because there's a lot more I want to talk about, but I do appreciate you coming today, so thank you.
Thank
June
you.
June is National Cancer Survivor Month, and this month Living Hope has been honored to celebrate pancreatic cancer survivors for their incredible strength, resilience, and inspiring courage. Today's Living Hope is dedicated to 30-year survivor Kay Kays, diagnosed at the age of 22. Kay has endured numerous treatments, surgeries, and despite the challenges, she has remained resilient, inspiring others and myself with her story and hope, and serves as a research patient advocate for multiple organizations, including PanCan. So thank you, KKs, for all that you do. Thank you, Teona. It's great to see you, and thank you for everything you're doing. Please continue, and you're looking great, and I love you, twin.
I love you back. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to see you, and it's always good to talk to you. So
Thank
thank you.
you.
Well, there you have it. One more reason to tune in each and every time to Living Hope, a weekly journey designed to provide hope, inspiration, and education for those living with pancreatic cancer. Sharing the real life stories of those really affected by this deadly disease and how they deal with it on a daily basis. And of course, if you'd like to share your story or know someone else, contact us here at the station. And if you need any help right away or know somebody that does, lots of numbers to call. We'll give you one again here. 8772-PANCAN. That's 877, the number 2, PANCAN, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. For the OC Talk Radio Network, I'm Paul Roberts, hoping you'll share this with somebody you know and come back and share the journey with us some more. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.